You're hanging upside down in complete darkness, pressed against dozens of other warm bodies. The cave walls echo with high-pitched squeaks and rustling wings. You can't see anything, but you don't need to. Sound is your world, and right now, the only sound that matters is your mother's heartbeat beneath you. You weren't supposed to be born yet. Your mother was flying through the night, hunting insects above a quiet forest when the contraction started. She barely made it back to the roost before you arrived, a tiny hairless creature no bigger than a human thumb. Your eyes are sealed shut, your ears are folded against your head, and your wings are nothing more than thin membranes stretched between fragile finger bones. But you're alive, and in the world of horseshoe bats, that's already an accomplishment. The colony around you is massive, thousands upon thousands of bats clinging to the cave ceiling. Some are adults who have survived multiple winters. Others are juveniles from previous years, still learning the deadly art of echolocation. And then there are the mothers like yours, each carrying a single pup that represents an entire year's investment. Your mother's body is your universe. You cling to her chest with needle-sharp claws, your mouth latched onto one of her nipples. The milk is rich and warm, packed with everything you need to grow. She doesn't move much during the day. None of them do. The colony hangs in a torpid state, conserving energy for the night's hunt. When evening comes, your mother faces an impossible choice. She needs to hunt. Without food, her milk will dry up, and you'll starve. But leaving you behind means risking everything. The cave is cold, and newborn bats can't regulate their body temperature. If she's gone too long, you'll freeze to death before she returns. Some mothers solve this problem by taking their pups with them on hunting flights. But you're too young, too weak. Your grip isn't strong enough to hold on during the violent maneuvers required to catch insects in midair. If you fall, that's it. Game over. So your mother makes a different choice. She leaves you pressed against the warm bodies of other mothers and their pups, creating a living blanket of shared body heat. It's not perfect, but it's your best shot at survival. The first few weeks are a blur of feeding and growing. Your mother returns before dawn each night, her belly full of moths and beetles. She finds you among the thousands of other pups, somehow recognizing your scent, your voice, your unique combination of squeaks and chirps. She settles beside you, and you latch on immediately, drinking until your tiny stomach is swollen with milk. Your eyes open around day 10, but the cave is so dark it hardly matters. What really matters is your ears. They unfold gradually, becoming the oversized, intricate structures that will define your existence. These aren't just ears. They're precision instruments capable of detecting sounds so faint they're nearly theoretical. By your third week, something extraordinary happens. You make your first echolocation call. It's weak, barely a whisper compared to the adults, but it's yours. You send out a high-frequency pulse, so high that most animals can't even hear it, and wait for the echo to return. The sound bounces off the cave wall and comes back to you, painting a crude picture of the world in your mind. It's not much at first, just shapes and distances, rough outlines of reality. But your brain is learning, building neural pathways that will eventually turn you into one of nature's most sophisticated hunters. Your mother still won't let you fly. When she leaves for her nightly hunts, you remain in the nursery area with the other pups. But now you're moving more, crawling across the cave ceiling using your thumbs and feet. Your wing membranes are stronger, though still far from flight ready. The colony is your classroom. You listen to the adult calls, learning the subtle differences between hunting echolocation and social communication. You practice your own vocalizations, strengthening the muscles that will one day allow you to navigate in complete darkness. Food becomes an obsession. Your mother's milk is still your primary source of nutrition, but you're growing fast, and she's struggling to keep up with your demands. Each night, she must catch enough insects not just to sustain herself, but to produce the rich milk you need. It's exhausting work, and some mothers don't make it. You watch other pups around you grow thinner, their mothers returning with less food each night. Some stop returning at all. Hawks patrol the cave entrance. Owls hunt in the nearby forest. Snakes slither along the cave walls, picking off any bat that hangs too low or falls from the ceiling. But you're lucky. Your mother is experienced, skilled. She knows the best hunting grounds, the safest flight paths. Night after night, she returns with enough food to keep your growth on track. By your 6th week, your wings have developed enough for short flights within the cave. These aren't graceful maneuvers, more like controlled falling with occasional success. You crash into walls, collide with other young bats, and tumble to the cave floor more times than you care to admit. But each flight teaches you something new. Your echolocation calls are getting stronger, more precise. You can now distinguish between different textures on the cave walls, detect the movement of other bats, even sense the subtle air currents that flow through the tunnels. The adult bats largely ignore you. They have their own concerns, territories to defend, mates to attract, hunting grounds to secure. You're just another youngster learning the ropes, and frankly, most of them probably assume you won't make it through your first winter anyway. Your mother, however, is becoming more demanding. She nudges you toward the cave entrance, encouraging longer flights. Sometimes she flies short distances ahead of you, calling back with guidance. Follow me. Turn left. Watch out for that stalactite. The first time you see the outside worlds, it's overwhelming. The cave mouth opens onto a landscape painted in sound. Your echolocation reveals trees, rocks, streams, and buildings, an entire universe that existed beyond your underground nursery. The air carries a scent that you've never encountered: flowers, earth, rain, and the chemical signatures of countless other animals. But it also carries danger. Your calls immediately attract the attention of every predator within range. A barn owl swoops down from above, its silent flight making it nearly undetectable until the last second. You dive back into the cave, heart hammering, wings trembling. Your mother follows you inside, but there's no comfort in her demeanor. If anything, she seems more determined to get you flying. The message is clear. The cave won't protect you forever. Eventually, you'll need to survive in the world outside, and the learning curve is steep. Your first real hunting expedition comes at 8 weeks old. Your mother leads you through the cave entrance, just as the last light fades from the sky. The forest below is alive with insects, moths fluttering around streetlights, beetles crawling through the underbrush, mosquitoes swarming near a stagnant pond. You try to follow your mother's lead, sending out echolocation calls and listening for the telltale echoes of potential prey. But everything is moving so fast. The insects are small, quick, and constantly changing direction. Your calls bounce off leaves, branches, and buildings, creating a cacophony of information that your young brain struggles to process. Your first hunting attempt is a disaster. You detect what you think is a large moth, dive toward it, and crash face first into a spider web. The sticky strands cling to your face and wings, and for a terrifying moment, you're trapped, vulnerable to any predator that might be watching. You tear free, but the experience shakes your confidence. Flying is hard enough without trying to catch prey at the same time. Your mother circles back, calling to you with what sounds almost like encouragement, but she doesn't help. This is something you have to learn on your own. The second attempt goes better. You detect a large beetle flying in a straight line, an easy target. You adjust your flight path, calculate the intercept, and strike. Your teeth close around the beetle's hard shell, and for the first time in your life, you taste something other than milk. It's not much, barely a mouthful, but it represents a fundamental shift in your existence. You're no longer completely dependent on your mother. You can hunt, even if you're terrible at it. Over the following nights, your skills improve gradually. You learn to distinguish between different types of insects based on their flight patterns and wing beat frequencies. Moths flutter erratically. Beetles fly in steady lines. Mosquitoes move in lazy circles. You discover that hunting near streetlights is both easier and more dangerous. The lights attract insects, creating target-rich environments, but they also attract other predators. You have to compete with other bats, avoid collisions with buildings and vehicles, and stay alert for the ever-present threat of owls and hawks. Your relationship with your mother begins to change. She still allows you to nurse occasionally, but her milk production is decreasing. More importantly, she's starting to show signs of irritation when you approach. The message is becoming clearer. It's time to become independent. The colony itself is changing too. The adult males, who largely ignored the nursery area during the summer, are becoming more active. They're establishing territories, calling to potential mates, and engaging in aerial battles with other males. The breeding season is approaching, and everyone knows it. You're caught in the middle of this transition. Too old to be a dependent pup, too young to be a full adult. You have to find your place in the complex social hierarchy of the colony, learn to navigate not just the physical world, but the political one as well. Some of the older juveniles band together, forming loose hunting groups. There's safety in numbers and shared information about good hunting grounds. You try to join one of these groups, but they're not particularly welcoming. You have to prove yourself, demonstrate that you can contribute rather than just take. Your first real test comes during a territorial dispute. A group of bats from a neighboring roost attempts to claim part of your colony's hunting grounds. The conflict erupts in midair, dozens of bats swirling in complex aerial battles, echolocation calls, overlapping in aggressive displays. You find yourself caught up in the chaos, unsure of what to do or which side to support. An adult male from the rival colony targets you, perhaps seeing you as an easy victory. He's faster, more experienced, and completely ruthless. The chase takes you through the forest canopy, between tree branches, under bridges, and around buildings. Your pursuer stays right behind you. His echolocation calls jamming your own navigation system. You can barely see where you're going, relying more on luck than skill to avoid obstacles. Then you remember something your mother taught you during those early hunting lessons. When you can't see clearly, trust your instincts. You stop trying to outfly your pursuer and instead focus on outmaneuvering him. You dive toward the ground, pulling up at the last second to skim the surface of a pond. Your pursuer, caught off guard by the sudden change in direction, overshoots and crashes into the water. He's not seriously hurt, but he's wet, cold, and thoroughly embarrassed. The other bats witness your escape, and suddenly you're no longer seen as just another inexperienced juvenile. You've proven that you can think under pressure, adapt to unexpected situations. It's a small victory, but in the world of horseshoe bats, small victories can mean the difference between acceptance and exile. As autumn approaches, your mother's behavior becomes increasingly distant. She no longer calls to you during flights, no longer shares information about good hunting spots. When you try to roost near her during the day, she moves away. The message is unmistakable. You're on your own now. It's both terrifying and liberating. For the first time in your life, every decision is yours to make. Where to hunt, where to roost, which social groups to associate with. The freedom is intoxicating, but so is the responsibility. You're about to face your first winter as an independent bat, and winter is when most young bats die. Food becomes scarce, temperatures drop, and the margin for error shrinks to almost nothing. Everything you've learned over the past few months will be put to the ultimate test. The colony around you is preparing for the long sleep of hibernation. Bodies are growing fatter as bats consume every insect they can catch, building up the fat reserves that will sustain them through the cold months. Social bonds are shifting as breeding pairs form, and territories are finalized. You watch it all with the keen awareness that your childhood is over. The protected world of the nursery cave is behind you now. Ahead lies the vast, dangerous, beautiful world of an adult horseshoe bat, assuming you survive long enough to claim it. Your first winter as an independent bat is nothing like the stories make it sound. There's no gradual descent into peaceful sleep. Instead, it's a desperate race against time, your body burning through fat reserves while you search for the last insects of the season. The hunting grounds that were rich with prey just weeks ago are now barren. Most insects have died off or gone into their own forms of hibernation. The few that remain are sluggish, hiding in crevices and under bark where your echolocation can barely detect them. You discover that desperation makes you bold. You venture into territories you would never have dared enter during the summer months, following the faint scent trails of other bats who might know where food still exists. Some nights you find nothing. Other nights you stumble across a swarm of late-season gnats and gorge yourself until your belly is distended. The cold is the real enemy. It seeps through your wing membranes, slows your reflexes, makes your echolocation calls weaker and less precise. Your body wants to shut down, to find a safe place, and let the torpor take hold. But you're not fat enough yet. If you hibernate now, you won't wake up in spring. Other young bats are facing the same crisis. You see them growing thinner each night, their flight patterns becoming more erratic as hunger affects their judgment. Some simply disappear. Others you find hanging motionless from tree branches, their bodies already stiff with death. The colony is fracturing. The large summer gatherings are breaking apart as bats disperse to find individual hibernation sites. Your mother is among those who leave, and you watch her fly away without even a farewell call. She has her own survival to worry about now. You join a small group of other juveniles, pooling your knowledge of remaining food sources. There's no friendship here, just mutual advantage. When one of you finds insects, the others follow. When danger threatens, you scatter in different directions. It's cooperation born of necessity, not affection. A barn owl nearly ends your story in November. You're hunting alone near an abandoned farm, following the weak echoes of what might be beetles in a rotting grain silo. The owl drops from above without warning, its feathers so perfectly designed for silent flight that your echolocation doesn't detect it until its talons are already reaching for you. You fold your wings and drop like a stone, the owl's claws missing you by millimeters. But now you're too close to the ground, vulnerable to ground-based predators. A farm cat emerges from the shadows, crouched low and ready to pounce. Between the owl above and the cat below, you make a split-second decision that saves your life. You fly directly at the cat, using it as cover from the owl while simultaneously confusing both predators. The cat leaps, the owl dives, and they collide in a tangle of fur and feathers. You escape in the chaos, but the encounter leaves you shaking for hours afterward. By December, You've reached the weight threshold for hibernation. Your body has stored just enough fat to sustain you through the winter months, assuming you find the right hibernation site. This choice will determine whether you see spring or become another casualty of your first winter. You explored dozens of potential sites. Caves are ideal, but the good ones are already claimed by older, more experienced bats. You can't afford to challenge them, not in your current state. Tree hollows offer some protection, but are vulnerable to temperature fluctuations. Abandoned buildings might work, but human activity is always a risk. Finally, you settle on a compromise, a small cave system that's not quite desirable enough for the adults, but offers adequate protection from the elements. You're not alone. Several other young bats have made the same calculation. You hang together in loose clusters, sharing body heat while maintaining enough distance to avoid territorial conflicts. Hibernation isn't sleep, it's something deeper, more profound. Your body temperature drops until it's barely above freezing. Your heart rate slows to just a few beats per minute. Your breathing becomes so shallow, it's almost undetectable. You exist in a state somewhere between life and death, sustained only by the fat reserves you accumulated during those desperate autumn nights. But even in hibernation, dangers persist. A sudden warm spell can wake you prematurely, forcing your body to burn precious energy reserves. Cold snaps can drop temperatures below your survival threshold. Predators still patrol the cave entrance, waiting for any bat that hangs too low or falls from the ceiling. You dream, if it can be called dreaming. Strange, fragmented visions of flight and hunting, echoes of summer nights when food was plentiful and the air was warm. Sometimes you dream of your mother, though her face is already fading from memory. Mostly you dream of insects, moths dancing around streetlights, beetles crawling through leaf litter, mosquitoes rising from stagnant water. Twice during the winter, you partially wake. The first time is because a weasel has entered the cave, drawn by the scent of hibernating bats. You're too torpid to fly, too sluggish to defend yourself. You can only hang motionless and hope the predator doesn't notice you among the cluster of other bats. The weasel takes one of the juveniles from your group. You hear the brief struggle, the cut-off squeak of alarm, but it leaves the rest of you alone. The second awakening comes during a January thaw. Temperatures rise just enough to trigger your body's warming response, and suddenly you're semi-conscious, hungry, and completely disoriented. Your fat reserves have dropped dangerously low, and every moment of consciousness burns energy you can't afford to lose. You force yourself back into torpor, but the interruption has cost you weeks of survival time. Spring arrives not with warmth, but with sound. The first insects of the year begin stirring, and their movements create tiny vibrations that penetrate even your hibernation stupor. Your body responds before your mind does, gradually warming itself in preparation for the hunting season ahead. When you finally wake fully, you're amazed to discover you're still alive. Many of the bats who shared your hibernation site didn't make it. Their bodies hang motionless from the ceiling, desiccated husks that will eventually fall and become food for cave-dwelling scavengers. But you survived. You're thin, weak, and desperately hungry, but you survived your first winter. That accomplishment alone puts you in an elite category among horseshoe bats. Most don't see their first spring. Your first hunt of the new year is pathetic. Your flight muscles have atrophied during hibernation, and your echolocation skills are rusty from months of disuse. You chase after a moth for nearly 10 minutes before finally catching it, and the tiny morsel barely registers as food after months of fasting. But each night gets easier. Your strength returns gradually, your hunting skills sharpen, and your confidence rebuilds. You're no longer the helpless juvenile who left the nursery cave last autumn. Winter has tempered you, taught you lessons about survival that can't be learned any other way. The colony begins to reassemble as spring progresses. Familiar faces return from their various hibernation sites, though many are missing. Your mother is among the survivors, but she shows no recognition when your paths cross during a night hunt. You're strangers now, competitors for the same resources. New hierarchies establish themselves as the survivors sort out territories and social positions. You're no longer at the bottom of the pecking order. Your winter survival has earned you a measure of respect, and younger bats now defer to your experience. But respect doesn't guarantee success. Food is still scarce in early spring, and competition is fierce. You have to fight for the best hunting grounds, defend your catches from thieves, and constantly watch for predators who are also hungry after the long winter. A family of raccoons discovers your hibernation cave and begins raiding it nightly. They can't reach most of the roosting spots, but they snatch any bat that falls or hangs too low. The colony is forced to abandon the site and find new quarters, a stressful relocation that costs time and energy everyone can barely spare. You settle into a new routine at your new roost. Dawn returns mean clustering with other bats for warmth and protection. Dusk departures are coordinated group flights to established hunting grounds. Night hours are spent in solitary pursuit of prey, each bat following its own strategy for survival. Your hunting techniques continue to evolve. You learn to identify the acoustic signatures of different insects, distinguishing between profitable targets and energy-wasting pursuits. A large moth might provide substantial nutrition but requires significant energy to catch. A swarm of gnats offers easier pickings but lower individual rewards. You develop preferences and specializations. Beetles become your favorite prey. They fly in predictable patterns and provide substantial nutrition. You learn to hunt them near compost piles and rotting logs where they congregate. Your echolocation becomes so finely tuned that you can distinguish between beetle species based solely on their wing beat frequencies. Water sources become crucial hunting grounds. Insects gather near ponds and streams to drink and lay eggs, creating concentrated feeding opportunities. But these areas are also favored by other bats, leading to mid-air collisions and territorial disputes. You learn to time your visits carefully, avoiding peak competition hours while still accessing the best prey concentrations. The social dynamics of the colony continue to shift as spring advances toward summer. Older females begin showing signs of pregnancy, their bodies thickening as new life develops within them. Males establish territories and begin their elaborate courtship displays, filling the night air with complex vocalizations designed to attract mates. You're caught between worlds, too young to participate in the breeding rituals, too old to be ignored by the adults. You watch the courtship flights with fascination, studying the aerial maneuvers and vocal patterns you'll need to master in another year or two. A territorial dispute nearly costs you everything in late May. Two adult males are fighting over prime hunting rights near a sewage treatment plant where insects are particularly abundant. You make the mistake of hunting in their disputed territory, and suddenly both males turn their aggression toward you. The chase is brutal and prolonged. They pursue you through the industrial landscape, their combined echolocation calls creating an acoustic storm that interferes with your own navigation. You dodge between smokestacks and under bridges, using every trick you learned during your winter survival to stay ahead of them. Finally, you make a desperate gambit. You dive toward a flock of starlings roosting on power lines, hoping to lose your pursuers in the chaos of panicked birds. The strategy works, but barely. The starlings explode into flight, creating a feathered maelstrom that confuses everyone's echolocation. In the confusion, you escape, but not before one of the males lands a bite on your wing membrane. The injury heals, but it leaves a permanent reminder of your place in the hierarchy. You're strong enough to survive, skilled enough to hunt, but not yet powerful enough to claim the best territories. That will come with time, assuming you live long enough to claim it. Summer brings abundance, but also new challenges. The colony swells with returning migrants and successful hibernators. Competition intensifies even as food becomes more plentiful. You establish a modest territory around a small pond where damselflies and water striders provide reliable hunting. Your territory isn't much. Other bats would probably consider it marginal, but it's yours. You've marked it with scent glands, defended it from intruders, and learned every acoustic signature within its boundaries. For the first time since leaving your mother's protection, you have a place in the world that belongs to you. Late one night, while patrolling your territory, you encounter something that stops you cold. It's another young bat, clearly struggling, flying erratically near the water's surface. You recognize the signs: inexperience, exhaustion, possibly injury. It's exactly how you looked during your first desperate months of independence. Every instinct tells you to ignore the struggling bat. Resources are limited, competition is fierce, and helping others is a luxury you can't afford. But something deeper, some memory of your own desperate nights, makes you hesitate. You call out, not aggressively, not territorially, but with something approaching guidance. The struggling bat responds, following your calls toward a cluster of insects you've been saving for later. You watch as it attempts to hunt, failing repeatedly, burning energy it clearly doesn't have to spare. Against all logic, you demonstrate a hunting technique that works well in this particular spot. The struggling bat watches, learns, and successfully catches its first insect of the night. It's a small victory, but in the world of horseshoe bats, small victories can mean survival. The young bat disappears into the night, and you never see it again. You don't know if your intervention made any difference in its long-term survival, but for the first time since achieving independence, you've acted not just for your own benefit, but for something larger. You're no longer just surviving. You're becoming part of the colony's continuity, a link between the knowledge of the past and the survival of the future. It's a responsibility you never expected to shoulder, but one that feels increasingly natural as the nights pass. Your second winter approaches with less terror than your first. You know what to expect now, understand the rhythms of preparation and survival. Your body is stronger, your fat reserves more substantial, your hibernation site carefully chosen based on hard-won experience. But winter is always dangerous, always uncertain. As you settle into torpor for another long sleep, you carry with you the accumulated wisdom of survival, the locations of reliable food sources, the acoustic signatures of profitable prey, the flight patterns that avoid predators, and the social dynamics that govern colony life. You've survived your first full year as an adult horseshoe bat. Ahead lies the possibility of many more years, of eventual breeding rights, of your own offspring hanging in future nursery caves. But first, you must survive another winter, another spring, another summer, in the endless cycle of survival that defines your existence. You survive your second winter, but it's different this time. You're not just hanging on by a thread, you're calculating, strategic. When you wake in March, you're among the first to emerge, giving you access to the earliest insects before competition intensifies. Your body has learned to hibernate more efficiently, burning fat at exactly the right rate to last until spring without wasting precious energy reserves. The colony that greets you is smaller than before. Harsh weather claimed several roosts, and disease swept through one of the larger hibernation sites. You recognize maybe half the faces from previous years. The rest are either dead or have moved on to join other colonies. It's a sobering reminder that survival is never guaranteed, no matter how experienced you become. Your hunting territory from last summer is gone. A pair of adult males claimed it while you slept, and they're not interested in negotiating. You could fight, but you're smarter now. Instead of wasting energy on a battle you might not win, you scout new areas, eventually settling on hunting rights near an old cemetery where moths gather around the decorative lighting. It's not ideal. The headstones create acoustic shadows that interfere with echolocation, and groundskeepers occasionally spray pesticides that reduce insect populations. But it's unclaimed territory, and you make it work. You learn to hunt between the monuments, using their irregular shapes to your advantage by herding insects toward acoustic dead zones where they can't detect your approach. Your second spring brings new social pressures. Several females from your birth year are pregnant now, their bodies swollen with developing pups. The males your age are starting to establish serious territories, not just the marginal hunting grounds you've been content with until now. Everyone is growing up, claiming adult roles in the colony's hierarchy. You're not ready for breeding, not yet. Your territory isn't large enough to support a family, and you lack the experience to protect offspring from the countless threats that face young bats. But you're no longer invisible to potential mates either. A few females show mild interest in your hunting displays, though nothing comes of it. Competition reaches a breaking point in late April. A young male about your age decides he wants your cemetery territory. He's larger than you, probably had better hunting grounds during his first year, but you have something he lacks: intimate knowledge of every acoustic signature within your boundaries. The confrontation happens at dusk, just as both of you are leaving your day roosts. He intercepts you near the cemetery entrance. His echolocation calls aggressive and territorial. You respond in kind, and within seconds, you're engaged in an aerial battle that will determine who controls the area for the rest of the season. He's faster in straight flight, but you know every monument, every tree branch, every obstacle in the area. You lead him on a chase through the cemetery's maze-like layout, forcing him to navigate terrain you've mastered while he's seeing it for the first time. He clips a low-hanging branch, stumbles in his flight pattern, and suddenly you have the advantage. You don't seriously injure him. That would waste energy you both need for survival. Instead, you demonstrate superior control of the territory, outmaneuvering him until he acknowledges defeat and retreats. The cemetery remains yours, but now you understand that holding territory requires constant vigilance. Other challengers will come. Your hunting skills continue to evolve throughout your second year. You discover that different insects require different strategies. Mayflies can be caught in spectacular feeding frenzies when they emerge en masse from nearby streams, but these events are unpredictable and short-lived. Craneflies are easy targets, but provide minimal nutrition. Caddisflies offer good protein, but tend to stay close to water, where competition with other bats is fierce. You develop a signature hunting pattern, a series of flight maneuvers and echolocation techniques that maximize your success rate while minimizing energy expenditure. Other bats begin to recognize your style, sometimes following you to productive hunting areas, sometimes avoiding your territory when they hear your distinctive call patterns. A close encounter with a peregrine falcon nearly ends everything in June. You're hunting high above the cemetery when the falcon stoops from above, reaching speeds that make your own flight seem sluggish by comparison. Only a last-second dive toward the ground saves you, but the falcon adjusts its trajectory and follows you down. You have perhaps 2 seconds to live when inspiration strikes. Instead of trying to outfly the falcon, an impossible task, you fly directly toward a large mausoleum, pulling up at the last instant to skim over its roof. The falcon, committed to its high-speed dive, can't adjust quickly enough and slams into the stone structure. The impact doesn't kill the falcon, but it's stunned long enough for you to escape into the darkness. You're shaking so badly you can barely maintain altitude, but you're alive. The encounter teaches you a crucial lesson about using your environment as a weapon, turning obstacles into advantages. Your third winner is routine by your standards, though routine doesn't mean easy. You've found an excellent hibernation site in an abandoned mine shaft, sharing space with about 30 other bats of various ages. The location is perfect: stable temperatures, protection from predators, and just enough humidity to prevent dehydration during the long sleep. But perfection attracts attention. Halfway through winter, a research team discovers your hibernation site. They're not there to harm you, just to count bats and collect data, but their presence is disruptive. Flashlights and human voices penetrate your torpor, forcing your body to partially wake and burn precious energy reserves. Some of the bats panic and attempt to flee into the winter night, a death sentence in sub-freezing temperatures. You're among the calmer ones who remain still, trusting that the humans will leave eventually. Your patience pays off. The research team finishes their work and seals the mine entrance to prevent further disturbances. Spring of your third year brings a fundamental shift in your priorities. You're no longer focused solely on personal survival. Your territory has expanded to include prime hunting grounds near a wastewater treatment plant where insects are abundant year-round. Your body has reached full adult size and strength. For the first time, breeding becomes a realistic possibility. But first, you need to prove yourself worthy of mating rights. The established males in the colony aren't going to simply step aside for a younger competitor. You begin challenging them directly, engaging in aerial displays and territorial battles that test every skill you've developed over the past 3 years. Your first serious challenge comes from a male who's controlled prime roosting sites for several seasons. He's experienced, cunning, and not easily impressed by younger rivals. The battle takes place over multiple nights, a series of escalating confrontations that attract observers from throughout the colony. Night 1 is pure intimidation, vocalizations, threat displays, and brief aerial skirmishes. Neither of you wants to risk serious injury, but both of you need to establish dominance. You match his aggression call for call, maneuver for maneuver, demonstrating that you won't be easily dismissed. Night 2 escalates to physical contact. Claws scrape against wing membranes, teeth snap at ears and throat. Bodies collide in mid-air battles that send both of you tumbling toward the ground. You're younger and faster, but he's more experienced and knows tricks you haven't learned yet. The decisive moment comes on night 3. He attempts a complex aerial maneuver designed to position him above you for a devastating downward strike. But you've been watching his patterns, learning his preferred tactics. You anticipate the move and counter it perfectly, ending up in the dominant position while he struggles to regain altitude. You don't press the attack. Instead, you demonstrate control by maintaining your advantageous position without inflicting damage. The message is clear. You could have hurt him badly, but chose restraint instead. It's a mature response that earns respect from the watching colony. He yields the territory, acknowledging your claim with a submissive flight pattern. You've won your first major territorial victory, claiming roosting sites that will attract potential mates and provide excellent launching points for hunting expeditions. Female attention follows almost immediately. Your new territory includes prime real estate near the colony's nursery areas, making you an attractive option for females preparing to raise offspring. Several approach with interest, evaluating your hunting skills, territory quality, and genetic fitness. Courtship among horseshoe bats is a subtle affair. There are no elaborate dances or colorful displays, just careful assessment of practical considerations. Can you provide good territory? Are you healthy enough to father viable offspring? Do you have the skills necessary to help offspring survive their critical first year? You demonstrate your qualifications through consistent hunting success, territorial defense, and social behaviors that suggest good parenting potential. When you share prey with potential mates or help younger bats learn hunting techniques, observant females take note. Your first mating opportunity comes with a female who survived the same brutal first winter you did. She's proven her genetic fitness through survival, and her evaluation of your territory and hunting skills apparently meets her standards. The pairing is more practical than romantic, a mutual agreement based on compatibility and survival prospects. Mating is brief but significant. You've successfully passed your genes to the next generation, achieving the biological imperative that drives all behavior in the colony. But reproduction brings new responsibilities and dangers. Your mate will be vulnerable during pregnancy and nursing, requiring additional territory and protection. You expand your hunting grounds aggressively, claiming areas you previously considered beyond your reach. Other males challenge these expansions, leading to a summer of constant territorial battles. You win most of them, but each victory costs energy and increases the risk of serious injury. Your mate gives birth in late June, producing a single pup in the colony's nursery cave. You don't see much of your offspring during its early weeks. Males aren't welcome in the nursery area, and your role is limited to defending territory and providing indirect support by keeping competitors away from prime hunting grounds. But you're aware of your pup's progress through the acoustic signatures that carry throughout the colony. You recognize its voice among the thousands of other young bats, track its growth and development through subtle changes in its calls. When it takes its first flight, you're hunting nearby, ready to intervene if predators threaten. Your offspring faces all the same challenges you survived, learning to hunt, avoiding predators, building strength for winter survival. You can't help directly, but your territorial success provides advantages. The hunting grounds you control offer excellent training opportunities, and your reputation deters some potential threats. As autumn approaches, you face a new dilemma. Your pup is approaching independence, but it's not yet skilled enough to survive on its own. Natural instinct tells you to withdraw support and focus on your own winter preparation. But watching your offspring struggle triggers memories of your own desperate first months. You compromise by maintaining loose territorial boundaries that allow your pup access to your best hunting areas while not directly competing for prey. It's a delicate balance that requires constant adjustment as your offspring's skills develop. Winter separation is inevitable and necessary. Your pup must find its own hibernation site, develop its own survival strategies, prove its fitness through the ultimate test of winter survival. You can't help anymore. From this point forward, your offspring's survival depends entirely on the lessons it learned during the summer months. Your fourth winter passes peacefully. You've chosen another excellent hibernation site, this time in a limestone cave system that provides perfect conditions for the long sleep. You're no longer anxious about survival. Your body has learned to hibernate efficiently, and your fat reserves are more than adequate. But hibernation brings strange dreams, fragments of memory and instinct that seem to carry information from previous generations. You dream of hunting techniques you never learned, predator avoidance strategies passed down through genetic memory, flight patterns that feel familiar despite being completely new. When spring arrives, you wake to discover fundamental changes in the colony. Several old males didn't survive the winter, creating openings in the territorial hierarchy. Your offspring made it through its first winter, a relief that surprises you with its intensity. You're no longer just a survivor. You're a contributing member of the colony's future. Your fourth year brings new challenges as younger males begin challenging your territorial claims. The cycle continues, with you now in the role of established adult, defending against ambitious newcomers. Some you defeat easily, their inexperience obvious in their clumsy attack patterns. Others prove more formidable, forcing you to use every technique you've mastered over the years. One challenger nearly succeeds in displacing you. He's young, fast, and apparently learned from watching your own rise to prominence. The battle lasts for weeks, a grueling test of endurance and skill that pushes both of you to your limits. Victory comes through experience rather than raw ability. You recognize his attack patterns because they mirror your own from previous years. You counter his strategies because you understand the thinking behind them. Age and cunning triumph over youth and speed, but just barely. Your mate from the previous year approaches you again, indicating interest in another breeding season. This time, the pairing feels less tentative, more established. You've both proven your survival abilities, successfully raised offspring, and demonstrated compatibility. The relationship has evolved from practical arrangement to something approaching partnership. Your second offspring arrives in late June, and this time, you're more aware of the parenting process. You recognize the subtle signs of your mate's condition, adjust your territorial defense accordingly, and prepare for the increased demands of supporting a family. But parenthood in your fourth year carries additional weight. You're no longer just ensuring your own genetic legacy. You're contributing to the colony's overall survival. Your experience, territory, and hunting skills represent accumulated knowledge that benefits the entire community. You begin taking more active roles in colony defense, participating in coordinated responses to predator threats. When a family of martens discovers one of the roosting sites, you're among the bats who organize harassment flights to drive them away. Your echolocation calls help coordinate group tactics, and your territorial knowledge provides strategic advantages. The colony is changing around you. Climate shifts are affecting insect populations, forcing adaptations in hunting strategies and territory selection. Urban development is eliminating traditional roosting sites, pushing the colony into marginal areas with increased predation risks. You adapt by diversifying your hunting techniques, learning to exploit new food sources as traditional ones disappear. When a shopping center replaces a wetland that provided excellent hunting, you discover that the parking lot lights attract different insects that can be caught with modified flight patterns. Your success in adapting to environmental changes makes you a model for younger bats. They observe your hunting innovations, copy your territorial strategies, and learn from your responses to new threats. Without intending to, you've become a teacher, passing knowledge to the next generation through demonstration and example. Life as a horseshoe bat might be demanding, but there's another creature out there facing challenges that make your existence look comfortable by comparison. Trust me, Their story is something else entirely. Check out the video and see what I mean. Your 5th year marks a turning point you didn't see coming. The territory you've defended so fiercely becomes a burden rather than an asset. Younger, hungrier bats challenge you constantly, and each victory comes at a higher cost. Your flight muscles aren't quite as strong as they were, your reflexes a fraction slower. In the brutal mathematics of survival, fractions matter. The change isn't dramatic, just a slightly longer recovery time after territorial battles, a marginal decrease in hunting success rates, the occasional missed opportunity that younger you would have seized without hesitation. But other bats notice these subtle shifts, and in a world where weakness equals death, perception becomes reality. A particularly aggressive young male targets your prime roosting site near the nursery caves. So, he's everything you were 3 years ago, fast, determined, and desperate to prove himself. The battle that follows feels like fighting a younger version of yourself, complete with the same tactics you once used to claim this very territory. You hold your ground, but barely. The victory feels hollow because you know it's temporary. Next season, or maybe the one after that, you won't be strong enough to repel these challenges. The thought should terrify you, but instead it brings an unexpected sense of clarity. Your mate approaches for a 3rd breeding season, but something has changed in her evaluation of your fitness. She's more cautious, more calculating in her assessment. Other females who once showed interest now focus their attention on younger, stronger males. The social dynamics that once favored you are shifting inexorably against you. Despite these concerns, mating is successful, and your 3rd offspring arrives in late June. This pup seems stronger than your previous young, perhaps benefiting from your accumulated experience in territory selection and mate choice. You find yourself more protective of this offspring, more willing to take risks to ensure its survival. The summer brings new challenges beyond the usual territorial disputes. A white nose syndrome outbreak hits a neighboring colony, killing thousands of bats in a matter of weeks. The disease hasn't reached your colony yet, but infected bats are spreading it as they flee their dying roosts. Every social interaction now carries the risk of exposure to a pathogen that could wipe out everything you've worked to build. Your colony implements unprecedented isolation measures. Roosting groups become smaller and more dispersed. Social grooming decreases dramatically. Even mating behaviors are affected as bats instinctively reduce contact with potential carriers. The vibrant community that defined your existence becomes a collection of suspicious, frightened individuals. You survive the outbreak, but many don't. Your mate from 2 seasons ago is among the casualties, along with several bats you've known since your juvenile years. The colony's population drops by nearly 40%, fundamentally altering the social landscape you've navigated for years. Territory becomes less competitive simply because there are fewer competitors. Your hunting grounds expand almost by default as rival claims disappear with their former owners. It's a hollow victory, more resources for fewer survivors in a world that feels increasingly empty. Your 3rd offspring's development becomes your primary focus as autumn approaches. This pup shows exceptional promise, mastering hunting techniques faster than either of your previous young. You find yourself sharing knowledge more actively, demonstrating advanced tactics you've never taught before. The teaching relationship surprises you with its complexity. Your offspring doesn't just copy your techniques, it adapts them, improves upon them, develops variations you never considered. Watching this innovation fills you with something approaching pride, though that emotion has no survival value in your harsh world. Winter preparation takes on new urgency as your body's efficiency continues its gradual decline. You need more fat reserves now to sustain the same hibernation period, but your hunting success rate has decreased just enough to make accumulation more difficult. The mathematical relationship between energy input and output is shifting against you. You choose your hibernation site more carefully than ever before, selecting a location that prioritizes safety over convenience. The cave is deeper, more protected, but also more isolated. If something goes wrong during hibernation, help won't be available. It's a calculated risk based on your reduced ability to defend yourself while conscious. Hibernation itself feels different this year. Your body enters torpor more slowly, maintains the suspended state less efficiently, and requires more energy to sustain basic functions. Dreams come more frequently, filled with memories of hunts from years past and faces of bats who didn't survive the various challenges you've overcome. You wake in March to discover that winter claimed more victims from your already depleted colony. The hibernation site you rejected because it seemed too risky was discovered by predators who killed a dozen bats in their sleep. Your cautious choice saved your life, but the knowledge provides little comfort when you count the missing faces. Spring hunting reveals the full extent of your declining abilities. Prey that you once caught effortlessly now requires multiple attempts. Your echolocation remains sharp, but your flight responses are just slow enough to let insects escape at the last moment. Younger bats begin succeeding in areas where you struggle. The territorial challenges that defined your previous springs are fewer but more serious. Challengers know you're vulnerable now, and they're willing to press attacks further than they would have dared in your prime. You win most encounters through experience and cunning, but each victory costs more than you can afford to spend. Your offspring from the previous year approaches, now fully independent and establishing its own territory. The interaction is awkward. You're no longer its teacher, but you're not yet its equal. The generational transition is happening faster than you expected, and you're not sure how to navigate the changing relationship. Mating season brings harsh reality. The female who bore your third offspring shows no interest in a fourth pairing. Her attention has shifted to a younger male whose territory borders yours. You watch their courtship displays with emotions you can't quite identify: jealousy, resignation, perhaps relief that the burden of supporting another family won't fall on your declining abilities. You don't breed in your 6th year. The realization hits gradually as potential mates consistently choose other partners. Your genetic contribution to the colony's future is complete. Your role as an active breeder finished. The shift from reproductive adult to colony elder happens without ceremony or acknowledgement. But new purposes emerge to fill the void left by reproductive failure. Your accumulated knowledge becomes increasingly valuable as environmental pressures mount. When a construction project destroys a major roosting site, you're among the scouts who locate alternative locations. Your memory of historical roost sites guides the colony to safety. You begin participating in different types of social interactions: information sharing rather than competition, guidance rather than dominance. Younger bats seek your advice on hunting techniques and territorial strategies. Your role is evolving from warrior to advisor, though the transition isn't always smooth. A late-season challenge from an overconfident juvenile nearly ends badly. He mistakes your advisory role for weakness and attempts to claim your remaining territory through force. The resulting battle is brief, but vicious. You may be past your prime, but you're far from helpless. The juvenile retreats with injuries that will remind him to show proper respect to experienced elders. Your 6th winter passes in deep solitude. The hibernation site you choose is perfect for your needs, stable, secure, and far from the social dynamics that increasingly exhaust you. Dreams come less frequently now, replaced by deeper states of unconsciousness that feel almost like practice for permanent sleep. Spring of your 7th year brings unprecedented changes to the colony's structure. Disease, predation, and environmental pressures have reduced the population to perhaps a third of what it was during your prime years. The social hierarchies that once seemed permanent are dissolving as survivors focus on basic existence rather than status competition. You find yourself in an unexpected position of leadership, not through dominance or territorial control, but through survival itself. You're among the oldest bats in the colony now, a living repository of knowledge that becomes more valuable as traditional structures collapse. When a family of owls establishes hunting territory near the colony's primary roost, you help organize the defense strategy. Your experience with predator behavior guides the group's response, and your knowledge of alternative flight paths provides escape routes that save lives during the coordinated attacks. The successful defense establishes your new role definitively. You're no longer competing for resources or mates. You're helping ensure the colony's continued existence. The shift from individual survival to community survival feels natural, though you're not sure when the transition occurred. Your hunting becomes more selective and strategic. You no longer chase every insect you encounter, instead focusing on high-value targets that provide maximum nutrition for minimum energy expenditure. The approach compensates somewhat for your declining physical abilities while providing a model for younger bats facing their own resource constraints. Food sharing becomes part of your routine. When you make an exceptional catch, a large moth or beetle, you often share portions with struggling juveniles or injured adults. The behavior would have been unthinkable during your competitive years, but now it serves purposes beyond simple altruism. Successful young bats strengthen the entire colony. Your 7th winter arrives with little fanfare. You've prepared adequately, chosen an excellent hibernation site, and arranged your affairs as much as any bat can. Sleep comes easily, deeper than ever before, filled with dreams that span your entire lifetime. But winter dreams are different now. Instead of hunting memories and survival scenarios, you dream of the colony's future. You see your offspring and their offspring, generation after generation, carrying forward the knowledge you've helped preserve. The dreams feel prophetic rather than nostalgic. You wake to your 8th spring, surprised to have survived another winter. Your body is noticeably frailer, your movements more deliberate, but your mind remains sharp. The colony greets your return with something approaching celebration. Elder survivors are precious resources that can't be replaced. The hunting grounds have changed dramatically during your lifetime. Urban development has eliminated many traditional areas, forcing adaptations that would have been unimaginable when you were young. Streetlights now provide hunting opportunities, but they also attract predators and create new dangers. You become a bridge between the colony's past and its future, helping younger bats understand why certain locations were historically important and how changing conditions require new strategies. Your knowledge of long-term patterns helps the colony adapt to environmental shifts that might otherwise prove catastrophic. A particularly harsh spring storm demonstrates your value in unexpected ways. While younger bats panic at the unfamiliar weather patterns, you recognize similarities to storms from your early years. Your calm guidance helps prevent panic flights that could scatter the colony beyond recovery. Mating season passes without personal involvement, but you play crucial roles in facilitating successful pairings. Your knowledge of genetic lines helps prevent inbreeding, while your assessment of territorial quality guides females toward the most promising mates. Your reproductive years are over, but your contribution to the colony's genetic future continues. Summer brings the joy of watching your offspring's offspring take their first flights. These third-generation descendants carry your genetic legacy forward while learning skills you help develop and preserve. The continuity feels more significant than any individual achievement from your competitive years. Your role as colony elder becomes more formalized as other survivors. Your age begin to fail. A contemporary who survived the same challenges you faced dies peacefully in his sleep, leaving you as the primary keeper of historical knowledge. The responsibility weighs heavily on your aging wings. You begin deliberately sharing information with younger bats who show leadership potential, hunting techniques, predator avoidance strategies, historical roost locations. Everything you've learned gets passed down through careful instruction and patient demonstration. Some lessons take multiple seasons to convey fully. Your eighth winter feels different from the start. Hibernation comes more slowly, and the torpor is less complete. You remain partially aware throughout the season, occasionally waking to assess conditions and adjust your position. The vigilance is exhausting but possibly necessary for survival. Dreams, during this winter, are vivid and strange. You experience hunts from decades past with perfect clarity. Feel the wind beneath wings that are now brittle with age. Taste insects that no longer exist in your transformed environment. The dreams blur the line between memory and fantasy until you're not sure which experiences were real. Spring arrives late, and you wake feeling fundamentally changed. Your eighth year of adult life has pushed your body beyond its design limits. Movement is painful, flight requires enormous effort, and hunting becomes nearly impossible. Yet your mind remains clear, perhaps clearer than ever before. The colony's reaction to your condition is mixed. Some younger bats show respectful concern, offering to share prey and providing protection during vulnerable moments. Others, driven by survival instincts, begin treating you as a liability rather than an asset. The social dynamics are complex and sometimes harsh. You make a decision that surprises everyone, including yourself. Instead of clinging to life through the generosity of others, you choose to make your final contribution to the colony's survival. On a clear night in late spring, you undertake one last flight, not for hunting, but for exploration. Your destination is a cave system you discovered years ago, but never fully explored. The location could provide excellent roosting opportunities for future generations, but accessing it requires navigating dangerous terrain that has claimed other scouts. Your aged body makes the flight nearly suicidal, but your experience gives you the best chance of success. The journey pushes you beyond exhaustion. Your wings struggle to maintain altitude. Your echolocation becomes intermittent, and your navigation relies more on memory than current sensory input. But you reach the caves, explore their depths, and confirm their suitability for colony use. The return flight proves impossible. Your strength fails completely as you attempt to leave the cave system, and you crash in the entrance tunnel. Injured and unable to fly, you face the reality that this exploration will be your last act as a member of the colony. But the information you've gathered is too valuable to die with you. Using the last of your strength, you call out with specific echolocation patterns designed to attract attention from any bats within range. The acoustic signals carry detailed information about the cave's layout, the quality of its roosting sites, and the safest approach routes. A young male from your colony hears your calls and investigates. You manage to convey the essential information about the cave system before your strength fails completely. The knowledge will survive, even if you don't, ensuring that your final contribution reaches those who can benefit from it. Your last conscious moments are spent listening to the young bat's departure calls as he carries news of your discovery back to the colony. The acoustic patterns confirm that he understood your message and will be able to guide others to this valuable resource. Your life's work is complete. The cave where you made your final discovery becomes your resting place. Your body joins the countless other bats who died in service to their colony's survival, adding your bones to the limestone floor that has collected such remains for millennia. It's not a tragic end, but a natural conclusion to a life lived fully within the harsh constraints of your species' existence. Your genetic legacy continues through your offspring and their descendants. Your knowledge legacy lives on through the techniques you taught and the discoveries you shared. The cave system you found with your dying effort becomes a crucial resource that helps the colony survive environmental challenges that would otherwise prove insurmountable. In the grand scheme of ecological time, your individual existence is barely a footnote. But in the specific context of your colony's survival, your contributions, from your successful breeding to your final exploration, represent exactly the kind of accumulated advantage that allows populations to persist through changing conditions. Your story ends, but the story of your species continues. Each generation builds upon the knowledge and genetic legacy of those who came before, adapting to new challenges while maintaining the essential behaviors that have ensured survival for millions of years. Life as a horseshoe bat is harsh, uncertain, and brief, but it's also part of something larger than any individual existence. The seasons blur together now as you enter what you didn't know would be your final year. Your ninth spring arrives with changes you can feel in your bones, literally. The calcium deposits that once made your wing bones strong and flexible have begun to weaken, creating microscopic fractures that make every flight a calculated risk. Your role in the colony has evolved into something unprecedented. You're no longer just an elder advisor. You've become a living library, the sole keeper of knowledge that spans nearly a decade of environmental changes, predator patterns, and survival strategies. Younger bats approach you with questions their own parents can't answer, seeking wisdom that only comes from outliving most of your generation. The hunting grounds of your youth are unrecognizable now. Urban sprawl has consumed the wetlands where you learned to catch mayflies. The cemetery that served as your first territory is now surrounded by shopping centers and parking lots. The insects have adapted, but so have the predators, creating new dynamics that younger bats struggle to understand without historical context. You spend most nights now perched at strategic observation points rather than actively hunting. Your body can no longer sustain the energy expenditure required for effective foraging, but your eyes and ears remain sharp enough to spot dangers that less experienced bats might miss. When you detect threats, a prowling cat, an approaching storm, unusual human activity, your warning calls carry the authority of undisputed experience. A particularly challenging situation arises when developers begin construction near one of the colony's secondary roosts. The noise and disruption send hundreds of bats fleeing in panic, but their frantic exodus leads them directly toward a known hawk nesting area. Younger colony leaders want to follow the fleeing bats, but you recognize the tactical error from similar scenarios decades earlier. Your intervention prevents a massacre. Using a combination of authoritative calls and strategic positioning, you redirect the fleeing bats towards safer routes you discovered during your territorial expansion years. The maneuver requires precise timing and intimate knowledge of both predator behavior and colony psychology, knowledge that exists nowhere else in the colony. The successful evacuation establishes your final role definitively. You're no longer competing with anyone for anything, territory, mates, or status. Instead, you've become something like a colony guardian, using your accumulated wisdom to prevent catastrophic mistakes that could doom future generations. Your daily routine adapts to your physical limitations while maximizing your contribution to colony survival. Dawn finds you positioned near the main roost entrance, where returning hunters must pass within range of your protective awareness. Your presence there serves multiple purposes: early warning against predators, guidance for disoriented young bats, and informal knowledge transfer as successful hunters share information about changing conditions. Food becomes both scarce and irrelevant to your daily concerns. Your metabolism has slowed dramatically, requiring fewer calories to sustain basic functions. But obtaining even those minimal nutrients demands help from others. Some younger bats share their catches willingly, recognizing the value of keeping you alive and alert. Others resent the resource allocation, though they rarely voice these complaints directly. The ethical complexity of your situation isn't lost on you. In the brutal mathematics of survival, supporting a non-productive colony member represents a questionable investment. Yet your knowledge prevents losses that far exceed the cost of keeping you fed. When you help avoid a single predator attack or guide the colony away from a contaminated food source, you save more resources than you consume. Your memory becomes increasingly valuable as environmental pressures intensify. Climate change has shifted insect emergence patterns, making traditional hunting schedules obsolete. Pollution has eliminated entire categories of prey species that sustained previous generations. New diseases spread through bat populations faster than natural immunity can develop. But you remember patterns from earlier decades, seasonal variations that repeat on cycles longer than most bats' lifespans. Your recall of historical weather patterns helps predict when unusual conditions might occur. Your knowledge of how the colony responded to previous environmental challenges provides templates for current adaptation strategies. A severe drought in late summer demonstrates the practical value of your institutional memory. As water sources dry up and insect populations crash, younger colony leaders consider desperate measures that could scatter the group permanently. You remember a similar drought from your fourth year and guide them toward emergency resources that sustained the colony through that earlier crisis. The drought survival strategy requires accessing roosting sites abandoned for years, following flight paths that avoid areas where desperate predators now concentrate, and exploiting food sources that only become viable during extreme conditions. None of this information exists in any form except your memory, and conveying it requires careful instruction spread across multiple nights. Your success in guiding the colony through the drought earns you something approaching reverence from survivors. Bats who previously viewed you as a burden now recognize that your knowledge represents their best hope for navigating future challenges. The social dynamics shift permanently in your favor, though by now such recognition means less than it would have in your competitive years. Autumn brings preparations for what you somehow understand will be your final winter. Your body has reached a state where hibernation becomes less about energy conservation and more about postponing inevitable system failures. You choose your hibernation site, with the care of someone selecting a final resting place. The location you settle on holds deep significance. It's the same cave system where you spent your first independent winter, the place where you proved you could survive without parental protection. The symbolism isn't lost on you, though survival instincts matter more than sentiment in your decision-making process. Hibernation preparation reveals the full extent of your physical decline. Building adequate fat reserves becomes impossible despite the assistance of younger bats who share their catches. Your body simply can't process and store nutrients efficiently enough to sustain a normal hibernation period. You'll be gambling that winter ends before your reserves do. The other bats gathering in your chosen hibernation site treat you with unprecedented deference. Your presence validates the location's safety and suitability. If the colony's oldest survivor chose this place, it must offer excellent protection. Your reputation has become a form of currency that benefits everyone around you. Sleep comes easily as temperatures drop and your metabolism slows. But this winter's hibernation feels different from all the others. Instead of the deep unconsciousness that characterized previous years, you maintain a strange semi-awareness that allows you to monitor conditions while conserving energy. Dreams and reality blend together during the long winter months. You experience perfect recall of hunts from decades past, conversations with bats long dead, flights through landscapes that no longer exist. The boundary between memory and imagination dissolves completely, creating a rich internal world that sustains you when physical resources run low. Periodically, you surface to partial consciousness to assess external conditions. These wakeful moments reveal that winter is claiming its usual toll. Several bats in your hibernation site have already died, their bodies growing cold as their fat reserves proved insufficient. You're still alive, but barely, sustained more by determination than by adequate nutrition. A particularly harsh cold snap in February pushes your survival to its absolute limits. Your body temperature drops dangerously low, your heartbeat becomes almost undetectable, and your breathing slows to intervals measured in minutes rather than seconds. You exist in a state barely distinguishable from death, held to life by the thinnest possible margins. But somehow, you survive. March brings gradually warming temperatures that allow your body to slowly resume normal functions. The recovery process is exhausting and incomplete. You're noticeably weaker than when hibernation began, but you're conscious and aware. Against all odds, you've survived your 9th winter. Your emergence from hibernation creates something of a sensation within the colony. Bats who assumed you wouldn't survive the winter greet your return with amazement and relief. Your survival has become a symbol of the colony's resilience, proof that even the most challenging conditions can be overcome through wisdom and determination. Spring hunting is now completely beyond your capabilities. Your wings can barely support your body weight, and your echolocation lacks the precision required for effective prey capture. You become entirely dependent on the generosity of others, a situation that would have horrified your younger self, but now feels like a natural progression. The dependency relationship proves more complex than simple charity. Younger bats who share food with you gain access to knowledge that significantly improves their own survival prospects. Your guidance helps them avoid mistakes that could prove fatal, locate resources they wouldn't find independently, and understand environmental patterns that span longer timescales than their individual experience. Your final spring becomes an intensive period of knowledge transfer. Sensing that time is running short, you make deliberate efforts to share everything you've learned with bats who show leadership potential. Hunting techniques, Predator avoidance strategies, historical roost locations, seasonal patterns. Everything gets passed down through patient instruction. Some lessons prove impossible to convey fully. The intuitive understanding of flight dynamics that comes from decades of experience can't be compressed into verbal instruction. The ability to read subtle, environmental cues that predict weather changes or predator behavior requires sensitivity that only develops through long practice. But you do what you can, focusing on the most crucial survival information while accepting that much of your accumulated wisdom will die with you. The knowledge that does get transferred successfully will improve survival rates for future generations, creating ripple effects that extend far beyond your individual existence. A young female who shows exceptional promise becomes your most dedicated student. Her quick intelligence and natural leadership abilities make her an ideal repository for your legacy knowledge. You spend countless hours with her, sharing insights that took decades to accumulate, hoping that at least some of your hard-won wisdom will survive your passing. The teaching relationship brings unexpected satisfaction. Watching her master techniques you developed, seeing her apply strategies you discovered, witnessing her leadership skills flourish under your guidance. These experiences provide meaning that transcends personal survival. Your knowledge will outlive your body, continuing to benefit the colony long after your death. Summer arrives with the familiar rhythms of colony life, though your participation has become purely observational. You watch from protected perches as younger generations court, mate, and prepare for another cycle of reproduction. The continuity is both comforting and poignant. Life continues regardless of individual mortality. Your final territorial dispute occurs not through direct competition, but through advisory intervention. Two young males engage in a destructive battle over prime hunting grounds, their conflict threatening to destabilize the entire local hierarchy. Your intervention, a series of authoritative calls that invoke your historical precedent in similar situations, helps resolve the dispute without serious injuries. The successful mediation represents your last significant contribution to colony governance. Your authority now rests entirely on accumulated respect rather than physical capability. But that authority proves sufficient to prevent conflicts that could weaken the colony's overall survival prospects. As autumn approaches, you face the reality that another winter hibernation is impossible. Your body lacks the resources to survive months of suspended animation, and building adequate fat reserves would require hunting success that's completely beyond your current abilities. This will be your final season of conscious existence. The knowledge brings clarity rather than fear. You've lived far longer than most members of your species, contributed significantly to your colony's survival, and successfully passed your genetic and intellectual legacy to future generations. Your life has achieved every goal that evolution programmed into your instincts. Your final weeks are spent in intensive consultation with colony leaders, sharing the last crucial pieces of information that might prove vital during your absence. Locations of emergency food sources, signs that predict severe weather events, behavioral patterns that indicate disease outbreaks. Every detail gets documented in the memories of those who will outlive you. The colony's response to your approaching death reveals the depth of your impact on their collective survival. Bats who rarely interacted with you directly still recognize that your passing will represent a significant loss of institutional knowledge. Your death will mark the end of an era, the closing of a living connection to environmental conditions and survival strategies that no one else experienced firsthand. A late October storm provides the catalyst for your final act of service. The weather patterns remind you of a catastrophic event from your third year that killed dozens of unprepared bats. Your warnings help the colony implement protective measures that prevent similar casualties, but the effort exhausts your remaining strength completely. You spend your last conscious night perched at the cave entrance, watching over the colony as they weather the storm in safety. The satisfaction of seeing your warnings heeded, your knowledge applied successfully one final time, provides a peaceful conclusion to a life defined by constant vigilance and accumulated wisdom. Dawn finds you motionless at your observation post, your body finally surrendering to the accumulated stresses of 9 years in one of nature's most demanding ecological niches. Your death passes quietly, without drama or struggle, a simple transition from exhaustion to eternal rest. The colony discovers your body and responds with behaviors rarely seen in your species. Instead of immediately removing the corpse, they allow it to remain at the entrance for several nights, as if acknowledging your final role as guardian. Young bats approach to examine your remains, perhaps instinctively recognizing that they're in the presence of something significant. Eventually, natural processes claim your body, returning your physical elements to the cave ecosystem where they'll nourish other forms of life. But your true legacy persists in the knowledge you passed down, the survival strategies you developed, and the genetic contributions that continue through your descendants. Your student, the young female who absorbed so much of your accumulated wisdom, assumes leadership roles within the colony. Her decisions reflect your teachings, her strategies build upon your discoveries, and her guidance helps others navigate challenges using principles you spent a lifetime learning. Your knowledge lives on, adapted and refined by new generations facing ever-changing conditions. The cave system you discovered during your final exploration becomes a crucial refuge when development pressures intensify around traditional roosting sites. Your last act of service saves the colony from displacement that could have scattered them beyond recovery. Future generations will use that shelter without knowing whose sacrifice made it available to them. Your genetic legacy persists through multiple generations of descendants who carry forward the traits that enabled your exceptional longevity. Your offspring's offspring exhibit the same combination of intelligence, adaptability, and caution that allowed you to survive challenges that claimed most of your contemporaries. Natural selection preserves and amplifies the characteristics that made you successful. The environmental changes you witnessed during your lifetime continue accelerating after your death. Climate shift, habitat destruction, and emerging diseases create survival challenges that would have tested even your accumulated wisdom. But the knowledge base you helped establish gives your colony advantages that less experienced groups lack. Years after your death, when especially difficult decisions face colony leaders, they still reference strategies you developed and principles you taught. Your influence on their survival culture persists through oral traditions that preserve essential information across generations. In a species where individual knowledge rarely survives personal mortality, your intellectual legacy represents an extraordinary achievement. The broader ecosystem continues its eternal cycles of change and adaptation. New predators appear, familiar ones disappear, and environmental conditions shift in ways that require constant behavioral adjustments. Your species persists through these challenges, using the same combination of individual brilliance and collective wisdom that defined your own existence. Your story ends, but the story continues. Each generation of horseshoe bats faces the same fundamental challenges you overcame, learning to hunt in darkness, avoiding countless predators, surviving brutal winters, contributing to their colony's genetic future. The specific details change with shifting conditions, but the essential struggle remains constant. Life as a horseshoe bat is harsh, demanding, and brief. Few individuals achieve the longevity and influence you managed during your 9-year existence. Most die young, their potential unrealized, their knowledge lost. But those who do survive long enough to contribute significantly to their species' continuity create value that extends far beyond their individual lifespans. Your legacy represents the accumulation of countless small victories, daily survival decisions, and moments of wisdom that collectively enabled not just your own survival, but the enhanced survival prospects of everyone who benefited from your knowledge. In the brutal mathematics of natural selection, such contributions represent the highest possible achievement, ensuring that your species' future remains viable despite the countless threats arrayed against it. The seasons continue their relentless march, indifferent to individual stories of triumph and tragedy. Your colony adapts to your absence gradually, the way ecosystems always adjust to the loss of long-established elements. The knowledge you shared gets tested against new realities, refined through application, and passed down to generations who will never know your name but benefit from your discoveries. Your former student emerges as the colony's primary strategic advisor, her decisions carrying the weight of wisdom you spent years transferring. When a construction project threatens the main roost, she guides the evacuation using flight patterns you mapped decades earlier. When disease pressure builds in the population, she implements quarantine protocols based on your memories of previous outbreaks. Your intellectual DNA permeates every major survival decision. The cave system you died discovering becomes legendary within colony oral tradition. Bats speak of the deep sanctuary found by an elder who gave his life to secure it, though specific details of your sacrifice fade with each retelling. What matters isn't historical accuracy, but practical value. The location remains a crucial resource that has saved countless lives during environmental emergencies. Your genetic descendants multiply across subsequent breeding seasons, carrying forward the traits that enabled your remarkable longevity. Some exhibit your cautious intelligence, carefully evaluating risks before committing to action. Others display your territorial instincts, claiming and defending resources with strategic brilliance rather than brute force. A few show your teaching abilities, naturally mentoring younger colony members through complex survival challenges. The environmental pressures you witnessed during your final years intensify dramatically. Urban development accelerates, consuming traditional hunting grounds faster than the colony can adapt. Climate patterns become increasingly erratic, disrupting insect emergence cycles that have remained stable for millennia. New diseases appear with frightening regularity, each outbreak testing the population's resilience. But your colony survives these challenges better than most, protected by institutional knowledge that traces back to your systematic observations and strategic insights. When hunting grounds disappear, they know how to locate alternatives using principles you developed. When weather patterns shift, they recognize the signs because you taught them to read environmental cues across longer timescales than individual experience provides. The teaching methods you pioneered become standard practice within the colony. Experienced adults now routinely share knowledge with promising juveniles, creating redundant information networks that prevent crucial survival data from being lost with individual deaths. Your innovation in systematic knowledge transfer has evolved into cultural practice that strengthens the entire population. A particularly severe winter, 5 years after your death, demonstrates the lasting value of your contributions. Temperatures drop to record lows, extending the hibernation period beyond normal limits. Many colonies suffer catastrophic mortality as bats exhaust their fat reserves before spring arrives. But your colony implements emergency protocols you developed during similar historical events, rationing energy more efficiently and selecting hibernation sites that provide optimal thermal protection. The survival rate during that brutal winter exceeds regional averages by nearly 30%. Colony leaders recognize that their success stems directly from strategies you refined through decades of experience. Your death prevented you from witnessing this triumph, but your legacy enabled it completely. New predators appear in the ecosystem, drawn by changing habitat conditions and expanding urban interfaces. A family of introduced martens establishes hunting territory near traditional roosts using techniques that local bat populations haven't encountered before. The threat could have devastated unprepared colonies, but your descendants implement countermeasures based on defensive strategies you developed against similar predators decades earlier. The successful adaptation illustrates how your knowledge base continues evolving through practical application. Your students don't just preserve your teachings, they build upon them, developing new solutions that incorporate your fundamental principles while addressing novel challenges. Your intellectual legacy remains dynamic rather than static, growing stronger through each successive application. Young bats now learn hunting techniques that blend traditional instincts with innovations you pioneered during your territorial expansion. Your method of using acoustic shadows to herd prey toward capture zones has become standard practice among elite hunters. Your territorial defense strategies influence how resources get allocated throughout the colony's social hierarchy. The broader bat community begins recognizing your former colony's exceptional survival rates. During inter-colony gatherings, representatives share knowledge that ultimately traces back to your systematic observations and strategic insights. Your influence spreads beyond your immediate descendants, improving survival prospects for entirely separate populations. A research team studying local bat ecology notices unusual behavioral patterns that distinguish your colony from others in the region. Their scientific analysis identifies more sophisticated territorial management, more efficient resource allocation, and more effective predator avoidance, all improvements that stem from cultural innovations you initiated through your teaching programs. The researchers don't understand the historical context behind these behavioral differences, but they document their effects carefully. Their published findings help conservation efforts by identifying management strategies that support higher survival rates in bat populations facing environmental pressure. Your legacy contributes to species preservation on scales you never imagined possible. Environmental conditions continue deteriorating throughout the region. Pesticide applications eliminate entire categories of prey insects. Light pollution disrupts natural hunting patterns. Urban noise interferes with echolocation systems. Many bat colonies face extinction pressure from these cumulative stresses, but your descendants persist through adaptive strategies rooted in principles you established. Your former territory, the modest hunting grounds you defended so fiercely during your competitive years, becomes a protected microhabitat when local conservationists recognize its unusual ecological value. The area's insect diversity remains higher than surrounding regions because your hunting practices inadvertently promoted sustainable prey population management. Your territorial instincts created conservation benefits you never intended. The cemetery where you learned to hunt as an independent juvenile gets converted into a shopping center, erasing another piece of your historical landscape. But your descendants have already adapted to hunt around commercial lighting systems, using techniques that build upon your innovations in exploiting human-modified environments. The physical spaces of your youth disappear, but the knowledge you gained there continues generating survival advantages. New diseases continue emerging in regional bat populations, each outbreak testing evolutionary adaptations and learned behaviors. Your colony's survival rates during disease events consistently exceed regional averages because your protocols for social distancing and resource sharing minimize transmission while maintaining essential community functions. Your understanding of epidemic dynamics, gained through surviving multiple outbreaks, protects generations who never experienced such events firsthand. The colony's reputation for stability and success attracts immigrants from failing populations elsewhere. These newcomers bring genetic diversity that strengthens the breeding base while learning survival strategies that trace back to your innovations. Your legacy becomes a magnet that draws resources toward your descendants, creating positive feedback loops that amplify your historical contributions. Seasonal patterns continue shifting as climate change accelerates. Spring arrives earlier, autumn extends longer, and winter temperatures fluctuate unpredictably. Many bat populations struggle to adapt their behaviors quickly enough to track these changes, but your colony implements flexible strategies based on your observations of historical weather variations. Your memory of long-term patterns provides templates for responding to unprecedented conditions. Your great-grandchildren begin reaching breeding age, carrying genetic traits that enabled your exceptional longevity while facing environmental challenges more severe than any you encountered. Some exhibit your cautious intelligence, carefully evaluating risks before making commitments. Others display your innovative problem-solving abilities, developing new techniques for exploiting resources in degraded habitats. The teaching lineage you established continues producing exceptional individuals who assume leadership roles within the colony. Your students' students now mentor the next generation, passing down knowledge that originated with your patient instruction but has evolved through practical application across changing conditions. Your intellectual DNA persists through this unbroken chain of knowledge transfer. Urban development reaches the cave system where you spent your final years, threatening to destroy the hibernation sites that have sheltered your colony for generations. But your descendants implement evacuation strategies based on your systematic exploration of alternative locations, relocating successfully to sites you identified during your territorial expansion decades earlier. Your foresight in mapping emergency resources saves the colony from displacement that could have scattered them permanently. The new hibernation sites prove even better than the original locations, offering superior thermal protection and predator security. Your colony's winter survival rates improve significantly after the relocation, demonstrating that your systematic approach to resource evaluation created long-term advantages that weren't immediately apparent. Your strategic thinking continues generating benefits years after your death. Competition between colonies intensifies as suitable habitat becomes increasingly scarce. Territorial conflicts escalate beyond historical norms as desperate populations fight over remaining resources. But your descendants avoid most of these conflicts through superior knowledge of marginal habitats that other colonies overlook or consider unsuitable. Your expertise in evaluating territorial potential provides competitive advantages that don't require direct confrontation. The acoustic signature techniques you developed for communication during emergencies become standard protocol throughout the regional bat community. Your innovations in long-distance information transfer help coordinate responses to threats that affect multiple colonies simultaneously. Your contributions to intergroup communication improve survival prospects for the entire local ecosystem. Research into bat cognitive abilities identifies your former colony as exhibiting unusually sophisticated problem-solving behaviors. Scientists studying their hunting strategies, territorial management, and social organization find evidence of cultural transmission that exceeds normal expectations for the species. Your systematic approach to knowledge sharing has created a population that functions at higher cognitive levels than typical bat communities. The scientific attention brings conservation resources that provide additional protection for your descendants' habitat. Protected status prevents some development pressures while funding research that identifies optimal management strategies for supporting bat populations under environmental stress. Your legacy indirectly generates conservation benefits that protect not just your own descendants, but entire ecosystem communities. Extreme weather events become more frequent and severe as climate patterns destabilize. An unprecedented heat wave kills thousands of bats across the region as temperatures exceed species survival thresholds. But your colony implements emergency cooling strategies based on your knowledge of historical temperature refugia, achieving survival rates that astonish researchers studying the disaster. The exceptional survival during the heat wave establishes your colony as a model for climate adaptation in bat populations. Conservation biologists study their behavioral strategies to develop management recommendations for protecting other communities facing similar threats. Your legacy contributes to species-wide survival strategies that benefit populations far beyond your immediate descendants. Your influence on colony culture becomes increasingly apparent as behavioral traditions that originated with your innovations get formalized into standard practices. Young bats learn territorial evaluation techniques you pioneered, hunting strategies you refined, and social protocols you established through decades of experience. Your knowledge base has evolved into cultural inheritance that shapes every aspect of colony life. The cave where you died during your final exploration becomes a pilgrimage site within colony tradition. Experienced adults bring promising juveniles to visit the location, sharing stories of your discovery and sacrifice while teaching advanced survival techniques in the environment you helped secure. Your death site becomes a classroom where your legacy gets transmitted to future generations. Environmental pressures continue mounting as human development accelerates and climate change intensifies. Many regional bat populations face extinction as their survival strategies prove inadequate for rapidly changing conditions. But your descendants persist through adaptive flexibility rooted in principles you established, demonstrating that systematic knowledge accumulation provides crucial advantages during periods of environmental instability. The colony's continued success attracts scientific attention from researchers studying resilience in wildlife populations under stress. Their findings identify cultural learning and knowledge transmission as critical factors in population persistence, validating the systematic approach to education you pioneered during your final years. Your innovations and knowledge transfer become recognized as essential conservation strategies. Well, your genetic legacy spreads throughout the regional bat community as your descendants mate with individuals from other colonies, introducing traits that enabled your exceptional survival into broader population gene pools. Natural selection amplifies characteristics that proved advantageous during your lifetime, ensuring that your biological contributions continue influencing species evolution long after your individual existence ended. The hunting grounds, where you achieved your greatest territorial successes, get incorporated into protected habitat networks established by conservation organizations. Your former territories thus become sanctuary zones that provide crucial resources for multiple bat species facing habitat loss. The areas you defended so fiercely during your competitive years now serve broader conservation purposes you never anticipated. Decades pass, and your direct influence on colony decisions fades as older generations die and newer ones assume leadership roles. But the cultural practices you established persist through institutional momentum, becoming traditional behaviors that new colony members learn without understanding their historical origins. Your innovations have evolved into cultural DNA that shapes species behavior across generations. The environmental challenges facing bat populations continue escalating as human impacts intensify and climate systems destabilize further. Many species experience range contractions and population crashes as their survival strategies prove inadequate for unprecedented conditions. But populations that inherited knowledge systems like those you pioneered demonstrate greater resilience, adapting more successfully to changing circumstances through flexible application of accumulated wisdom. Your story becomes legend within the colony's oral tradition, though specific details fade through successive retellings. What persists isn't biographical accuracy, but practical significance, the understanding that exceptional individuals can contribute knowledge that benefits their species across generations. Your example inspires young bats to pursue excellence in survival skills while sharing their discoveries with others. The broader ecosystem continues its eternal process of adaptation and change. New species appear, established ones disappear, and environmental conditions shift in ways that require constant behavioral adjustments. Your descendants navigate these changes using principles you established, demonstrating that systematic knowledge accumulation provides advantages that transcend specific environmental challenges. The cave systems you explored during your lifetime become crucial refugia as surface habitats face increasing development pressure. Your systematic mapping of underground resources provides survival options that other colonies lack access to, creating competitive advantages that persist long after your death. Your exploration legacy continues generating benefits for descendants you never met. Your influence on regional bat ecology becomes measurable through population studies that track survival rates and reproductive success across different colonies. Communities that inherited your innovations consistently outperform those relying solely on instinctive behaviors, demonstrating that cultural learning provides evolutionary advantages that complement genetic adaptation. The scientific understanding of bat cognition and social learning advances partly through studies of behavioral innovations that originated with your systematic approach to knowledge transfer. Researchers recognize that exceptional individuals can contribute discoveries that benefit entire populations, validating the conservation value of protecting experienced adults who serve as knowledge repositories. Your legacy persists through mechanisms both obvious and subtle. Direct descendants carry your genes and learned behaviors into future generations. Colony traditions preserve your innovations in hunting strategies and territorial management. Cultural practices you established continue shaping social interactions and survival decisions. Your influence permeates every aspect of your species' continued existence in ways that extend far beyond individual mortality. The story continues beyond your personal narrative, encompassing the ongoing struggles and triumphs of a species adapting to unprecedented environmental challenges. Each generation faces new threats and discovers new opportunities, building upon the foundation of accumulated knowledge that includes your contributions alongside those of countless other individuals who dedicated their lives to species survival. Life as a horseshoe bat remains harsh, demanding, and uncertain. Most individuals still die young, their potential unrealized, and their knowledge lost. But those who do achieve longevity and influence create value that transcends their individual existence, contributing to the collective wisdom that enables species persistence through changing conditions. Your story exemplifies this process, a single lifetime of extraordinary dedication that generates benefits extending across generations and throughout entire ecosystems. The cycle continues, each new generation learning from the past while adapting to present challenges and preparing for unknown futures. Your legacy lives on through this eternal process of knowledge accumulation and transmission, ensuring that your dedication to survival excellence continues influencing your species' fate long after your individual story concluded. In the end, this continuity represents the highest achievement possible, ensuring that your life's work contributes to something larger and more enduring than personal existence. The seasons blur past your descendants as decades turn into generations. Your great-great-grandchildren navigate a world that bears little resemblance to the landscape where you learned to hunt. Shopping centers sprawl where forests once stood. LED streetlights have replaced the warm glow of older bulbs, changing the entire spectrum of nighttime hunting. The insects themselves have evolved, adapting to urban environments in ways that require constant tactical adjustments. But the principles you established persist. Young bats still learn to read acoustic shadows, still practice the herding techniques you pioneered, still approach territorial disputes with the strategic patience you demonstrated throughout your competitive years. Your innovations have become so deeply embedded in colony culture that new generations assume these behaviors are simply natural instincts rather than hard-won discoveries passed down through careful instruction. A severe drought strikes the region 50 years after your death, more intense than any weather event in recorded history. Water sources that sustained bat populations for centuries dry up completely. Insect populations crash as their breeding habitats disappear. Many colonies face extinction as their traditional survival strategies prove inadequate for such extreme conditions. Your descendants implement emergency protocols that trace directly back to strategies you developed during the drought of your 4th year. They know which seemingly barren areas hide emergency water sources because you mapped them decades earlier. They understand how to modify hunting patterns to exploit the few insects that survive extreme conditions because you documented these techniques through patient observation and systematic experimentation. The colony's survival rate during this catastrophic drought exceeds regional averages by nearly 60%. Other bat communities send scouts to observe their strategies, hoping to learn techniques that might save their own populations. Your innovations spread throughout the regional ecosystem, improving survival prospects for species and populations you never encountered personally. Climate change accelerates beyond all previous projections, creating environmental instability that tests every survival strategy your species has evolved over millions of years. Temperatures fluctuate wildly between seasons, disrupting hibernation cycles that depend on predictable thermal patterns. Storm systems intensify beyond historical norms, creating weather events that can scatter entire colonies during vulnerable migration periods. Your descendants adapt through flexible application of principles you established during your own encounters with unprecedented weather. They recognize early warning signs because you taught them to read environmental patterns across longer timescales than individual experience provides. They implement protective measures because you developed protocols for responding to extreme conditions based on systematic analysis of cause and effect relationships. The cave system, where you died exploring, becomes a legendary sanctuary within regional bat folklore. Multiple colonies now use the location during emergencies, sharing resources and knowledge in ways that would have been unthinkable during the territorial competition of your era. Your final sacrifice created more than just physical shelter. It established a tradition of inter-colony cooperation that strengthens the entire regional ecosystem. Researchers studying bat evolution identify your former colony as exhibiting unusually rapid behavioral adaptation to environmental challenges. Their genetic analysis reveals that your descendants carry beneficial mutations at higher frequencies than typical populations, suggesting that your exceptional longevity reflected underlying genetic advantages that natural selection has amplified across subsequent generations. The scientific findings attract conservation attention from international organizations studying wildlife resilience under climate change. Your colony becomes a model system for understanding how cultural learning and genetic adaptation interact to produce population-level survival advantages. Research funding flows toward protecting the habitats and resources that enabled your legacy to flourish. Urban development pressures intensify as human populations expand and available land becomes increasingly scarce. Traditional roosting sites disappear at accelerating rates, forcing bat populations into marginal habitats that offer minimal protection from predators and weather extremes. Many colonies fragment and disappear as their territorial bases erode beneath development pressure, but your descendants possess strategic advantages that enable them to exploit urban environments more effectively than populations relying solely on instinctive behaviors. They know how to evaluate the suitability of artificial structures because you pioneered techniques for assessing unconventional roosting opportunities. They understand how to hunt around artificial lighting because you developed methods for exploiting human-modified environments during your territorial expansion. The colony establishes successful breeding populations in urban areas where other bat communities fail to persist. Their success demonstrates that systematic knowledge accumulation can provide competitive advantages that overcome habitat degradation through superior resource utilization. Your innovations in environmental assessment continue generating benefits in contexts you never anticipated. New diseases emerge with frightening regularity as global travel and environmental disruption create novel pathogen transmission pathways. White nose syndrome evolves into more virulent strains that resist traditional treatment approaches. Novel viruses jump between species barriers, creating epidemics that devastate wildlife populations unprepared for such rapid biological changes. Your descendants implement disease prevention strategies based on protocols you developed during the outbreak that claimed your mate from your second breeding season. They understand how to balance social cohesion with infection control because you analyzed the trade-offs between community benefits and disease transmission risks. Their survival rates during epidemic events consistently exceed regional averages by margins that attract scientific attention. The systematic approach to knowledge preservation you pioneered becomes essential for species survival as environmental change accelerates beyond the pace of genetic adaptation. Populations that maintain strong cultural learning traditions demonstrate greater resilience than those relying primarily on inherited instincts. Your innovations in information transfer have evolved into survival strategies that benefit your entire species. Extreme weather events become the new normal as climate systems destabilize completely. Hurricane-force winds destroy roosting sites that provided shelter for centuries. Unprecedented heat waves kill thousands of bats simultaneously as temperatures exceed physiological tolerance limits. Severe cold snaps extend hibernation periods beyond the energy reserves that sustained previous generations. Your descendants navigate these challenges through adaptive strategies rooted in principles you established during your own encounters with environmental extremes. They recognize danger signs earlier because you taught them to interpret subtle environmental cues that predict major weather events. They implement protective measures more effectively because you developed systematic approaches to risk assessment and emergency response. The colony's exceptional survival during multiple climate disasters establishes them as a reservoir population that can recolonize areas where other bat communities have been eliminated. Their reproductive success provides genetic material that helps rebuild regional populations decimated by environmental catastrophes. Your legacy contributes to species-wide recovery from disasters that threaten extinction. Technological changes in human society create new categories of environmental hazards that require novel adaptation strategies. Wind farms appear throughout traditional migration corridors, creating collision risks that kill millions of bats annually. Radio towers and cellular networks generate electromagnetic fields that interfere with echolocation systems. Light pollution disrupts circadian rhythms and confuses navigation patterns. Your descendants develop countermeasures for these technological threats through systematic application of problem-solving approaches you pioneered during your own encounters with novel environmental challenges. They learn to detect and avoid wind turbine installations because you established protocols for recognizing and responding to unfamiliar dangers. They adapt hunting strategies to function despite electromagnetic interference because you demonstrated how to modify behavioral patterns when traditional methods prove inadequate. The cultural traditions you established continue evolving through practical application across changing conditions. Young bats learn advanced survival techniques that blend your fundamental principles with innovations developed by subsequent generations facing unprecedented challenges. Your knowledge base remains dynamic rather than static, growing stronger through each successive application while maintaining core insights that transcend specific environmental conditions. International conservation efforts begin recognizing the importance of protecting not just habitat and genetic diversity, but also cultural knowledge systems that enable wildlife populations to adapt rapidly to environmental change. Your colony becomes a case study in the conservation value of maintaining behavioral traditions that preserve accumulated survival wisdom across generations. Research programs dedicated to understanding bat cultural learning receive increased funding as scientists recognize that traditional conservation approaches focused solely on habitat protection and genetic management are insufficient for species survival under rapid environmental change. Your innovations in systematic knowledge transfer become recognized as essential components of comprehensive conservation strategies. The broader ecosystem continues its eternal process of adaptation and change, but the pace of transformation now exceeds anything in geological history. Species that cannot adapt quickly enough face extinction, while those possessing flexible behavioral repertoires demonstrate greater resilience. Your descendants persist through environmental challenges that eliminate populations lacking comparable cultural learning systems. New predators appear in regional ecosystems as climate change and habitat modification create novel species interactions. Invasive birds establish hunting territories in areas where local bat populations evolved without such predation pressure. Introduced mammals exploit resources and occupy niches that create competitive disadvantages for native wildlife communities. Your descendants implement defensive strategies based on predator avoidance techniques you developed during encounters with novel threats throughout your lifetime. They recognize danger patterns because you established systematic approaches to threat assessment that transcend specific predator categories. They coordinate group responses because you pioneered communication protocols that enable effective collective defense against superior individual opponents. The teaching lineage you established continues producing individuals who assume leadership roles not just within your immediate colony, but throughout the regional bat community. Your students now mentor populations recovering from environmental disasters, sharing knowledge that originated with your patient instruction but has evolved through practical application across diverse ecological challenges. Colony integration becomes increasingly important as habitat fragmentation forces previously isolated populations to share resources and coordinate survival strategies. Your descendants possess superior social skills that enable them to facilitate intergroup cooperation because you established cultural practices emphasizing knowledge sharing and collective problem solving over pure competitive advantage. The acoustic communication techniques you developed for coordinating responses during emergencies become standard protocols throughout regional wildlife communities. Your innovations in long-distance information transfer help coordinate responses to threats that affect multiple species simultaneously, improving survival prospects for entire ecosystem communities rather than just individual bat populations. Environmental toxins accumulate in food webs as industrial pollution and agricultural chemicals create contamination that persists across multiple generations. Heavy metals concentrate in insect tissues, creating neurological problems in bats that consume contaminated prey. Pesticide residues disrupt reproductive systems, reducing fertility rates and offspring survival throughout affected populations. Your descendants demonstrate superior ability to detect and avoid contaminated food sources because you established systematic approaches to prey evaluation that emphasized long-term health consequences rather than immediate nutritional benefits. Their lower toxin exposure rates result in higher reproductive success and improved neurological function compared to populations lacking comparable environmental assessment skills. The principles you established for evaluating territorial quality prove equally applicable to assessing contamination risks in potential food sources. Your systematic approach to environmental analysis enables your descendants to identify subtle indicators of pollution that less experienced populations overlook, providing competitive advantages that improve survival prospects in increasingly contaminated environments. Habitat restoration projects begin incorporating behavioral considerations alongside traditional ecological factors, as scientists recognize that successful wildlife recovery requires not just suitable environmental conditions, but also populations possessing the cultural knowledge necessary to exploit restored habitats effectively. Your colony becomes a source population for recolonization efforts because their behavioral repertoire enables them to establish successful populations in restored areas where other communities struggle. The systematic exploration techniques you developed during your territorial expansion provide templates for evaluating the suitability of restored habitats for supporting viable bat populations. Your descendants serve as pioneer colonists who assess resource quality and identify potential challenges before larger population transfers occur, reducing the risk of costly reintroduction failures. Research into the mechanisms underlying exceptional population resilience identifies cultural learning and knowledge transmission as critical factors that enable rapid adaptation to environmental change. Your innovations in systematic information transfer become recognized as essential components of conservation strategies designed to maintain viable wildlife populations under unprecedented environmental pressure. The broader scientific community begins acknowledging that individual animals can contribute discoveries that benefit entire species through cultural transmission mechanisms that preserve and amplify beneficial innovations across generations. Your story becomes a case study in the conservation value of protecting experienced individuals who serve as repositories of accumulated survival wisdom. Educational programs designed to promote wildlife conservation begin incorporating your story as an example of how individual dedication to survival excellence can generate benefits that extend far beyond personal existence. Your legacy inspires new approaches to conservation that emphasize the importance of maintaining cultural continuity alongside genetic diversity and habitat protection. The cave systems you explored throughout your lifetime become protected sanctuary networks that provide crucial refugia for multiple species facing habitat loss and environmental degradation. Your systematic mapping of underground resources creates infrastructure that supports biodiversity conservation across entire regional ecosystems, demonstrating that individual exploration efforts can generate conservation benefits that extend far beyond their immediate purposes. Urban planning initiatives begin incorporating wildlife corridor designs that reflect behavioral knowledge accumulated through systematic observation of species like yours who successfully adapted to human-modified environments. Your innovations in exploiting artificial habitats inform development strategies that minimize conflicts between human infrastructure and wildlife survival requirements. The hunting techniques you pioneered for exploiting insects around artificial lighting become standard practices taught in wildlife management programs designed to help pet populations adapt to increasing urbanization. Your behavioral innovations contribute to species-wide adaptation strategies that improve survival prospects under continued habitat modification. Climate adaptation strategies for wildlife populations begin emphasizing the importance of maintaining behavioral flexibility and cultural learning systems that enable rapid responses to unprecedented environmental conditions. Your systematic approach to knowledge accumulation and transmission becomes a model for conservation programs designed to enhance population resilience under climate change. The environmental challenges facing your species continue escalating as human impacts intensify and natural systems destabilize beyond historical ranges of variation. But populations that inherited knowledge systems like those you pioneered demonstrate superior adaptation capabilities, persisting through conditions that eliminate communities relying solely on genetic programming and instinctive responses. Your influence on species survival extends through mechanisms both direct and indirect, obvious and subtle. Genetic contributions persist through descendants who carry beneficial mutations you possessed. Behavioral innovations continue through cultural transmission systems you established. Environmental knowledge accumulates through systematic exploration and observation techniques you pioneered. Social cooperation improves through communication and teaching protocols you developed. The story continues beyond your personal narrative, encompassing the ongoing evolution of survival strategies that enable species persistence through unprecedented environmental challenges. Your contributions become part of the accumulated wisdom that defines your species' response to rapid environmental change, ensuring that your dedication to survival excellence continues influencing evolutionary outcomes long after your individual existence concluded. In the grand timeline of ecological history, individual lives represent brief moments in processes that span geological ages. But exceptional individuals can contribute innovations that alter species trajectories in ways that persist across evolutionary timescales. Your legacy demonstrates how dedicated pursuit of survival excellence can generate benefits that transcend individual mortality, creating value that endures through the eternal cycle of adaptation and change that defines life itself. The seasons continue their relentless progression, each bringing new challenges and opportunities that test the accumulated wisdom of countless generations. Your descendants face these trials equipped with knowledge that traces back to your patient observations and systematic innovations, demonstrating that individual dedication to excellence can create advantages that benefit entire species across evolutionary time. Your story concludes, but its influence persists through the ongoing struggle for survival that defines existence in a world of constant change and unlimited challenges. The principles you established continue guiding decisions that determine life and death for individuals you never met, ensuring that your pursuit of survival excellence contributes to something larger and more enduring than any single lifetime could encompass. The final chapter of your existence unfolds not with drama, but with the quiet inevitability that defines all life in the natural world. Your descendants, now scattered across multiple generations, carry forward the accumulated wisdom of your 9 extraordinary years through behaviors so deeply embedded they seem like instinct rather than learned tradition. A century passes. The world your great-great-great-grandchildren inhabit bears no resemblance to the landscape where you first learned to navigate by sound alone. Megacities sprawl across continents, their artificial lights creating hunting opportunities you could never have imagined. Climate refugees, both human and animal, reshape ecosystems on a planetary scale. The very concept of natural habitat becomes a historical curiosity studied by researchers trying to understand how wildlife once lived. Yet your legacy persists through adaptation strategies that prove remarkably durable across changing conditions. The systematic approach to environmental assessment you pioneered enables your descendants to evaluate novel habitats with precision that amazes researchers. They thrive in vertical cities where other bat species struggle, exploiting resources in ways that demonstrate the lasting value of accumulated wisdom over pure instinctive response. The cave where you died becomes a monument within scientific literature, though no researcher understands its true significance. Studies document unusual mineral deposits created by centuries of bat guano, but they miss the deeper story, how one individual's final sacrifice secured resources that enabled an entire lineage to survive challenges that eliminated countless other populations. Your innovations in acoustic communication evolve into something approaching language as environmental pressures reward increasingly sophisticated information transfer. Descendants develop call structures that encode complex environmental data, territorial boundaries, and threat assessments with precision that surpasses anything documented in pre-human ecosystems. Your teaching methods have produced a population that functions at cognitive levels that redefine scientific understanding of animal intelligence. The systematic exploration techniques you developed become encoded in genetic memory through generations of natural selection, favoring individuals who possess superior environmental assessment abilities. Your behavioral innovations have literally altered the evolutionary trajectory of your species, creating populations better equipped to survive in rapidly changing environments. Research programs studying animal cognition identify your lineage as exhibiting problem solving abilities that approach human level complexity in specific domains. Their navigational skills, social organization, and environmental adaptation strategies demonstrate that individual innovations can drive species level cognitive evolution when transmitted effectively across generations. The broader ecosystem continues its eternal dance of adaptation and survival, but the rules have fundamentally changed. Sequence. Species that cannot adapt rapidly enough face extinction on timescales measured in decades rather than millennia. Those possessing flexible behavioral repertoires and strong cultural learning traditions demonstrate resilience that enables persistence through environmental challenges unprecedented in geological history. Your story becomes part of something larger, a testament to the power of individual excellence to influence outcomes that extend far beyond personal existence. In a world where most lives end quickly and quietly, leaving no lasting trace, your dedication to survival mastery created ripples that continue expanding across generations, ecosystems, and evolutionary time itself. The hunting techniques you perfected in abandoned cemeteries now help descendants navigate urban environments where traditional prey species have been replaced by insects adapted to artificial ecosystems. The territorial strategies you developed through years of competition enable modern populations to establish stable communities in habitats that would challenge any species relying solely on ancestral programming. Your influence permeates every aspect of your species' continued existence, from the acoustic signatures used in long-distance communication to the criteria employed in evaluating potential mates. The knowledge you accumulated through 9 years of extraordinary survival has become the foundation upon which future generations build their own innovations, creating an unbroken chain of adaptive improvement that stretches across centuries. As the story reaches its natural conclusion, the ultimate truth becomes clear. Your life mattered not because of its individual achievements, but because of its lasting contributions to something infinitely larger than personal survival. In the harsh mathematics of natural selection, where individual existence typically ends in anonymous death, your legacy represents the highest possible achievement, ensuring that your species' future remains viable despite countless threats that would otherwise prove insurmountable. The seasons continue their eternal cycle, indifferent to individual stories of triumph and tragedy. But within that vast indifference, your dedication to survival excellence has created lasting value that transcends mortality itself. Your descendants navigate each new challenge equipped with wisdom that traces back to your patient observations and systematic innovations, proving that exceptional individuals can indeed influence the course of evolutionary history. Life as a horseshoe bat might be brutal and unforgiving, but there's another creature out there facing challenges that make your story seem almost comfortable by comparison. Trust me, what they endure is absolutely wild. Check out the video and see for yourself. Until then, see you soon.